let's get started. This is the, feel free to applaud. So this is the future of gameplay cinematic authoring in Unreal. So we'll be talking about all things, sequencer, in-game cinematics or IGCs or gameplay cinematics and such. So if you're in the wrong talk, feel free to stay, still stay because there's a lot of interesting stuff. So who am I? My name is Greg Richardson. I am a senior technical product manager here at Epic, managing sequencer and IK retargeting. So you might have seen me in live streams, videos, or posts. So super excited to talk about sequencer, which is what we'll be focusing on today. Before Epic, I was a pipeline technical director and a technical animator, mostly in game cinematics, game trailers, film visualization, commercials. So I've kind of done pretty much everything under the sun and have loved sequencer and am very happy to be able to be involved and push on a lot of really great sequencer workflows. So, and while I've been at Epic, I've been mostly on the product side, focused on either control rig and then moved on to retargeting. And then, I think last year or 2 years ago, I took over sequencer. So what we're going to cover today, I'm going to give a brief history of sequencer. It's been 8 years since sequencer has been out. And I think it would be good to provide some context, especially with the developments and how it's kind of where we've gotten to today. I'm going to go over what's out now, especially review the features that are out since 5.0, in particular for gameplay cinematics. And then we're going to talk about where we're going and what does the future look like for gameplay cinematics. So let's talk about sequencer. So just let's add an interactive element in here. How many of you all use sequencer on, let's just say, a weekly or even daily basis? All right, cool. And just out of curiosity, how many of you are using it for gameplay cinematics? All right, awesome. So obviously, sequencer has a lot of avenues and a lot of different things that it supports. So let's take a look at those. So in the beginning, this was released in 4.12. It was an experimental in 4.10 and 4.11 with the full release in 4.12 in 2016. And funny enough, the first prototype was actually for UMG animations, if you're familiar with that for our UI animators out there. And the main message that we wanted to do was to provide the power of nonlinear editing with 3D animation editing for in-game cinematics and shot creation, and also to eventually replace Matinee, which was deprecated in 4.18. And this has powered so many GDC demos and so many game cinematics from Epic, all the way from, the Paragon days and up until now. It's been a super powerful tool for our internal teams and obviously everyone here and, a multitude of our customers around the world. So we're so happy that, everyone's using sequencer and taking it to its fullest extent. Obviously, our main internal use case, right, is gameplay cinematics. So every Fortnite event, end of chapter event, narrative moment that you see within the seasons, or our Big Bang that you saw with announcements of Lego Fortnite and Rocket Racing and Fortnite Festival, all are done in sequencer. So all our teams are constantly using sequencer and pushing on it. We have obviously had a lot of tech demos that have pushed sequencer. Things like the Matrix Awakens or Senua's Revenge or any of our GDC demos have really pushed it and have brought in a lot of features back. The two up there are just, a few of the features, but I wanted to highlight those with root motion blending and camera animations and camera shakes. Now, I would be one of our other major customers, right, is within linear media. So, virtual production, animated content, or folks that are, trying to do offline renders for cinematics. So this is our major customer within this internally is our Fortnite cinematics team. So every season trailer that you see, every chapter trailer, or any sort of event, it's all done with our Fortnite cinematics team, all directly within sequencer and completely in Unreal. And you can, if you all went to Frederick Nielsen's talk, you kind of saw like a video where folks were animating an engine, and that's just kind of a screenshot up above there showing what Fortnite cinematic looks like. And obviously, externally, there has been a massive adoption within not only the virtual production space, but folks that are creating animated films or TV shows, and that has brought in a whole slew of users who are so familiar with digital DCC applications in order to create animations. And that's brought back things such as like Blueprint and Python scripting. As sure many of you know, Sequencer is one of the oldest API exposures out there for editor scripting, and we're still continuing exposing more, and Movie Render Queue and Movie Render Graph. And another area is gameplay and performance capture. So again, tech demos and that have really powered this through GDC. Take recorder, being able to record not only just gameplay, but performance capture. That was used in the first Paragon trailer, then later for virtual production, powering real-time live at SIGGRAPH with Sinua. And that led into other virtual production use cases, such as a virtual camera and eventually on The Mandalorian. We've also have partnered with the MetaHuman team to be able to bring out MetaHuman Animator as you can see it uses Sequencer, right? It uses a timeline. And also partnering with them with the audio-driven animation initiative that they've released for 5.5. And if you haven't checked that out in the kiosk, please do. It is awesome. They've done a fantastic job. Character animation. So since 5.0, I'm sure you all have seen our pushes to be able to completely animate our characters directly in Unreal. This has been pushed very heavily internally by a multitude of projects, but the one that I would like to highlight is Lego Fortnite. All the character animations in there, just every single animation that you see in there was completely done and authored in Engine. So no round tripping, none of that sort, using all of these great tools like Curve Editor, Control Rig, and our additional animation authoring tools. So not only are we supporting cinematics and linear media, but we're supporting character animators and gameplay animators. This is a fairly new one, but being able to animate time of day. So this was actually a need from Fortnite, where they needed an automation of sequencer, but for time of day. So Fortnite gameplay wanted volume support with fixed 24-hour cycles that was responsive to gameplay, and they wanted to simplify the creation of good environmental lighting. And also, Fortnite Chapter 4 was set to launch with Lumen, so they needed an art-directable solution for their time-of-day setups. And that brought in a lot of interesting things, such as hierarchical blending of sequences, even temporal blending of subsequences as well. And for my UEFN users in the audience, you might be familiar with Day Sequencer, and that's what this is called. That's been released in UEFN. And my colleague, Nicholas Drake, is actually giving a presentation right now on Day Sequencer, so you might have to check that out offline if you're here. But it is now available in UE in 5.5, so definitely recommend checking that out. Niagara. Again, Fortnite gameplay and cinematics really needed a really robust real-time VFX solution, and Niagara came about as a part of Paragon, being a first driver, and also GDC demos, and they needed a timeline. So what did they use? Sequencer. And in here, that's brought back very interesting use cases, such as the lifetime cycle track and the cache track, which provides a snapshot of the simulated data from Niagara. And it was originally for renders, but now we use it quite often internally for automated testing and diffing and debugging. As I mentioned before, Sequencer's first prototype was actually in UMG or UI animations. And Fortnite gameplay, all the UIs are done in UMG, so a lot of the animations are done with Sequencer. And this has brought back a lot of great use cases, such as material blending and some of our user-defined dynamic bindings. And yeah, we love what that team has done with it, and we continue to support them throughout. Broadcast and live events. You might have heard about our, in 5.4, about the new motion design tools, right? And how powerful that is. We've been collaborating with that team. They use Sequencer very heavily, and they have a lot of very interesting workflows in the broadcast and motion design space. We told them, hey, go for it, do whatever you need. We'll love to bring some of this back to the core eventually, but you need to service your customers, and we want to help as much as possible. And they were able to deliver a really fantastic experience and a great set of tools that we're working with them to bring some of that back to core sequencers, so that way all users can take a look. Now, let's take a step back and see this as a whole. And so you see, sequencer has been the backbone of all of these different use cases that the Unreal ecosystem has provided. And it's been really amazing to see what users have done to push sequencer and Unreal to do. And I think with everyone here and seeing it all within Unreal Fest, it has pushed the notion that real-time 3D is truly for everyone and all industries, right? And everyone needs a timeline. Everyone needs to be able to animate and be able to animate well and easily and see the real-time feedback. But over the course of sequencer development, there's been a lot of push to support what I would say editor-focused use cases. And as Epic has been trying to capture all of these personas in these industries. And in doing so, we've made the most powerful real-time nonlinear editing cinematic authoring tool. And users all around the world, including you all in the audience, love sequencer and Unreal as a whole. And we internally are incredibly proud of this achievement. But we see how much this has shifted over the years. And since the launch of UE5, we've actually been trying to shift our focus back towards our roots of gameplay cinematics. So you'll see a balanced effort from us moving forward. We have a lot of support teams that are helping us within the editor-focused use cases. And we on the sequencer team really want to focus on how we can innovate cinematic authoring as a whole within Unreal. So let's talk about what we've been doing since UE5 to show how we have been making that balance and why. So since 5.0, we've continued our conversion for the entity component system. You might be familiar with a fairly long article back in UE4 that talked about sequencer performance. And we've been converting from an object-oriented system to the entity component system. And that conversion is still ongoing. Pretty much nearly all tracks have been converted, but there's just been some that haven't been quite converted just yet. As I mentioned before, blendable subsequences. This was a direct ask from Fortnite Gameplay and many of our customers, being able to blend these not only in time, but hierarchically, and also in blueprints. Another request that we've gotten often is just better material blending and expanded material support. So, being able to see the material slot name instead of numbers, right? And being able to access all different kinds of materials and being able to animate them directly within Sequencer. Another expansion has been user-defined dynamic bindings, being able to use the level sequence director blueprint to be able to define how those bindings get bound in Sequencer. And then improvements such as movie render graph, animation authoring advancements, and a massive UX pull. So that's what we've been doing in 5.5 or 5.0. And in doing so, we've also released the cinematic sequence device within UEFN. So UEFN brings in a completely different set of users who may not have as much experience with AAA quality tools to create or author cinematics and interactive experiences. And currently, Sequencer is being used for a lot of different things that isn't fully around cinematics, but rather around gameplay mechanics. And while it hasn't been its intended use, it has caused a lot of interesting discussions on how we want to move forward for authoring experiences, interactive experiences. So now let's talk about what's new in 5.5. So in 5.5, we're opening up our user-defined dynamic bindings by just saying, hey, you can now create custom binding types. So users are able to create their own binding types in C++ or blueprints to be able to further control how Sequencer controls an object. We'll also be providing a new default binding type called a replaceable. And existing binding types and features such as spawnables, possessables, and dynamic bindings are going to be converted to these custom binding types. So when you convert from 5.4 or even older versions and you bring it into 5.5, it will be automatically done for you. You don't have to worry about it. Now, you might think, those in the audience, like, what's a replaceable? Why do I care about custom bindings? Well, let's talk about it. So here I have a video where I have a spawnable cube and I'm just playing this sequence and I'm going into Pi and activating that cinematic, right? Fairly simple. You're familiar with spawnables. We don't have to go over those. Now I can go into my convert menu and I can convert it to a replaceable. And in the editor, you see no real visual difference. You have the same animations on the cube, but their spawn track has converted to the binding lifetime track. However, when I go into Pi and I activate that cinematic, nothing is happening. And why is that? It's because a replaceable provides an editor preview object, but then at runtime can be bound to something completely different. This happens quite a lot and has been a massive ask from our gameplay customers where they want to be able to replace stuff at runtime, but still have the objects be bound in sequencer to then control. So how do I bound this to, say, this cone in my level? I've added a level sequence actor, and I'm just resolving the binding by just doing, by activating our binding overrides and just saying, hey, this cube, I want you to control this cone. So I'm gonna set the level sequence to autoplay, and when I go back into Pi, you'll see that that cone that's taking over and all the animations go across. So you can do this within level sequence actors, but we can actually also do this within blueprints. So for example, let's say I want to spawn something instead. Like I want to spawn a sphere within blueprints and have the cube take over that animation at runtime. So when I play this sequence now, I will spawn a sphere and all the animations come across, right? So that's what a replaceable provides. I have an editor preview object that I can just author stuff, but at runtime, it can be replaced with something completely different. And not only can we do this with like static meshes and such, I can do this with skeletal meshes and any other things that I want to control runtime. So here, what I'm doing is, instead of having to bring in the full player blueprint or the full player character blueprint, all I'm doing is doing a lighter weight skeletal mesh, and I'm saying, hey, I want you to take control of the player at runtime. All right, so I'll go ahead and play this cinematic, and I'll run it, and you'll see that it completely takes over. I didn't have to drag in the player character blueprint. I just used the skeletal mesh actor and just had it take over immediately, and that was a couple of clicks. If you don't want to use the level sequence director blueprint, you can actually create your own blueprint asset that houses all of this data. And you can have exposed properties. So in this case, I have an exposed property for player index. I'm grabbing the context from the world, getting the player pawn. I have the player index, and I'm just resolving that binding. And I can also, within my class defaults, provide, what kind of spawnable do I want it to create while I'm editing in the preview, right? Because sometimes maybe I want a character of disproportion versus a character of disproportion. So I can just go ahead and go into the convert and just add that in, or I can create my new one directly from here. So the last example that I have is just being able to create it from scratch. So let's say I want to, be able to replace the actor based off of a tag. We use tags often within gameplay, and maybe the player character has interacted with something, like a prop, and you want it to be taken over. So all I'm doing here is, hey, find the first actor with this tag, and we're going to expose this tag so that way I have access to it per instance of the binding, right? And yeah, just take it over. So I'll expose those and go ahead and compile. And then once I'm done with that, set up the defaults, I can make, nice pretty names, and I can go and convert to that custom binding now and just go into my new sidebar details and set the tag to something interesting. In this case, I just did test, so, and have it take over my cone instead of, doing the previous method with the binding overrides. Yeah, that's the power of replaceables. It's super exciting, and we want to expose the ability for anyone to create whatever binding types that they need. All right. Now, this one I'm very, very excited about because it's been a long requested feature for Sequencer, which is conditionals for tracks and sections. So you're able to now conditionally activate track rows, and sections in sequencer, all based off of logic that you can write in C++ or blueprints. And we have default conditions such as platform and scalability. So meaning that if you want like an animation to play on a specific platform versus a separate one, you'll have that ability now within level sequences. So here's an example. I think the video play? Okay, there we go. I have this animation playing when I want it on a different character, but I want this animation to play on the orange mannequin. Previously, I would have to set up a bunch of subsequences and link them together and all that. It would just be a bit of a hassle to create and just way more assets to deal with, right? So what I can do now is under either track rows, tracks, or sections, I can go into my sidebar details and access conditions. And this allows me to assign a blueprint created condition that gets activated. So under what I'm going to do here is on the track row, I'm going to go into the conditions and I'm just going to author a director blueprint condition. And this will just live within the level sequence. And under the context menu, I can split that out and I get some nice pins that I can work with, either the context, the binding, or any of the bound objects. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab the player pawn and I'm just going to grab the character. I'm going to grab the mesh from there. And from that mesh, I can say, hey, are you the orange UEFN mannequin, right? And if you are, cool. Return this result, and we'll see how we can link that condition directly within my animations. And the great part, right, is that since these are all in tracks, track rows, or sections, they can all work hierarchically as well. So I can just say, hey, all animations on this track row use this condition. All animations on this one use this. On the left-hand side, I have a new indicator column that tells me, hey, I have conditions. Do you have a condition on this track row or section? And I'm able to change different arguments, such as if I wanted to change the scope between global or just the sequence or the object. And I can also change the check frequency. Maybe I want it to be check once or check global. And I can also force it on in the editor so that way I'm checking it for the preview. So I'll go ahead and play the cinematic in Pi, and you'll see that I activate the punch. And when I am the Quinn mannequin, no animations are playing when I'm trying to activate the cinematic. So let's do it the other way, where I want to play this set of animations when I'm everything but the UEFN mannequin. So I'll go and assign actually the same condition. I don't have to create another one. So I'll just assign it the same one that I authored. But within the sidebar details, I'm just going to invert it. So that means that when it's the UEFN mannequin, it'll play that punch, but when it's any other mesh, it'll play that crouch. So I'll go ahead and play that, and then I'll switch over to Quinn, and I'll play the same cinematic, and we get that crouch. So no more having to deal with a bunch of assets, linking and all that. You can just do it all directly in sequencer. Now, some default conditions that we provide are platform. So again, we can activate these based off of all the provided platforms that UE supports. So Android, iOS, Mac, Windows, PS4, PS5, etc. Same thing with scalability. If you're familiar with our engine scalability settings, you can actually have operations based off of that. So you can have less than, equal to, greater than, and be able to check that out. You can also do group conditions, so you can have multiple sub-conditions if you wanted to. So if you have multiple scalability, multiple platforms, you can add all of those conditions within there. And within the operations, we have and, or XOR, or exclusive OR. Super powerful. And not only can you create them within your director blueprint, but you can actually create custom blueprint assets that have these conditions, right? So I'll go ahead and create my custom asset, and this follows the same logic as we did with the binding types. I can expand the pin, I get all the stuff that I have previously. I can expose a property. If I want to, I can also add override functions for check frequency and scope. I would just have to add variables that I can expose for those, and they would appear directly on the sidebar details. So I have a lot of control. I can, check. I can, with that player mesh check, right? Instead of hard coding it to the UEFN mannequin, maybe I wanted to show, any sort of skeletal mesh that I wanted to assign. So here's another example where I have this cube, and I have a material switcher track, which is going to identify and look for player health. So I've created a custom game instance where I have a variable called player health, and I'm just lowering that, upping and lowering that based off of, some key bindings that I have. And I'm just saying, hey, is it equal to this property, right? So this one is the material for if player health is at 100, this one, and the next one's like 80, 60, so on and so forth. So each time player health has changed, it's got to change to those colors and switch the materials. And what's happening is that I'm having these conditions check on tick. So it's not just once, right? I can check constantly as the cinematic is playing. So I'm playing the cinematic and it's on loop. And I'm just changing player health. And you can see that I can change the materials directly. And while I'm showing a very simple example of this, right, you can imagine how you can do all sorts of animations and all sorts of different things that you can do this. So I think one of our developers did one where it was checking if the player was moving. So if the player was moving, then this cinematic would play, or this subsequence would play. Or if it wasn't, then this subsequence would play, right? So super powerful stuff. We're really excited to get that in your hands. Time warp. This has been also a very popular request. You might be familiar with time dilation within Sequencer, but as you all know, it affects all of engine time, which is not really ideal for certain situations, especially in gameplay, because you might not want it to fully affect everything, but it does, right? So we now have a way to add time warp tracks within our subsequences, or as a global track, or as within our skeletal animations. And you can author play rate or time warp as a curve within the curve editor. So let's check this out. So I have this mannequin punching this cube, and I can go into my add menu and just quickly add a time warp track. You'll see that I have an orange indicator on the left, so similar to our indicator column for conditions, just so that way you can see that time warp is activated within your sequence. And you can also turn that column off if you want to, but in this case I don't. I want to make sure I see that time warp is available. And it will always be on top, so that way you don't ever lose the idea that you have time warp. Now, something interesting is that we do have two playheads here, and there's a particular reason why. The red one is your common one that you're familiar with as you're scrubbing, but the orange one is actually showing what's happening in post-time warp space. So that way you have an idea of what's actually happening, whether, if it's half speed or you're doing some ping-ponging or you're doing any sort of holds. You need the ability to see, okay, what is actually happening within my sequence, right? So as I play, you can see the orange playhead does that little ping pong, but the red playhead just continues on and plays it like as, normally you would see within Sequencer. You can turn that off if you want to as well within editor preferences, or when you mute it, it will actually disappear. So, and time warp is super powerful. There's all sorts of great things within here. You see that I did a little ping pong loop. I can change my keys to stepped, and I now get stepped animation, and I can do it just the entire sequence or the subsequence or just the animation. And it's super powerful. You can do hold frames. You can, loop back and forth. You have now total control over how you want to manipulate time within Sequencer and your sequence contents for animations. So I'll mute that and show you how you can add these to skeletal animation sections. So within skeletal animation, on the plus track, I can just add time warp directly on the top and just add time warp curve. You see that I get my indicator again just to see, hey, like I have time warp available or on, right? And I can author this directly within Sequencer, and it will only affect the skeleton. It will not affect the cube. So I can, slow it down or speed it up or, have it loop or do all the things that I was talking about previously within time warp, and it will only affect the skeletal animation there. And this is super powerful because, there's a lot of folks within character animation and in cinematics where you want to I want to just slow this character, but then, I don't want to, mess with anything else, right? And we've also expanded for this within subsequences, which I'll show you in just a second. You can also mute it, which is also super powerful, just so that way you can do some A/B comparisons, right? And you can also switch to a play rate. So previously you can animate the play rate. You only had a fixed value, right? So now you can also animate the play rate if you would like, instead of just doing a full time warp curve. So now let's talk about how you can add this to subsequences. So I'm going to go into my root sequence here, which has the same subsequence as with this punch. But let's say I want to only affect the subsequence, right? So again, I can just add time warp, and you'll see the indicator once again, and I can animate this in the curve editor, and it only affects the contents in that subsequence. So this is a super powerful tool, and we're really excited to get these into your hands as well, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of nice fiddling around with time. So don't get your Picasso faces, right, with the melted clocks. All right. This one I'm also very excited about. This has been something that I've been asking for a while, which is transform origin override for subsequences and shots. So some of you might be familiar that you can actually change the transform override instance data in a level sequence actor, but we've brought that into sequencer. Basically, you'll be able to offset your instance data directly in subsequences and shots. These are animatable and they can be channel masked. And you can actually select a section to get the gizmo within the viewport. So here I have the same, animation, all of that, and I'll go back to my root sequence, and I'm going to add this as a subsequence. I'm going to add that punch into the subsequence, and you'll see that I have my camera, and I have, my subsequence, and I'm thinking, oh, I planned this camera move and I planned this, but wow, this is way, I need to fix this, right? Previously, I would have to go into the subsequence and move all this stuff. Well, I can now right click and I can just move just the clip offset of the subsequence. So I can animate this and I'm like, oh, I'm just selecting the section of the subsequence and I'm just using the viewport gizmo and just moving that route. So we're basically introducing clip offsets within subsequences and shots. And this only exists on that instance, right? So it doesn't affect anything underneath. You just get it directly within the subsequence or shot and it just stays there. And you can also animate it, so you can do that on translations or rotations, you don't have to turn on rotations if you like, but yeah, you can animate it, just way more power, so much easier instead of having to move everything else, right? You can just do it on the subsequence, and yeah, that's something I've been really pushing for a while, so it's awesome to see. Thank you. There was a rather large applause during Fred's talk about UX and quality of life, and yeah, I would like to go over these. I think one of the devs, Brad, is in the audience. But you saw sidebar details, being able to navigate context options much faster and easier. No more having to constantly right-click and get access to properties and such, right? We also have selectability, being able to isolate viewport selection to just your sequence contents. No more accidentally, clicking on the sky sphere or the floor, right? When you're just selecting either a control or a camera and such. Display actions, being able to just temporarily isolate and / or hide specific channels in the sequence. This is super powerful if you want to compare channels or you just have so much going on in your sequence, or you just want to condense it a bit. And finally, custom text filters. So bringing customizable text filters and a search history within sequencer, because that's been desperately needed as well. So here's a video just going over all the new features within quality of life. So here I'm able to select, all of my stuff, but then when I activate the selectability on the toolbar, which is just next to the magnet button, I am only able to select stuff in the viewport that is in my sequencer, right? So I can't select the sky, I can't select floor, and this also works with marquee selection. Within our display actions, I can just select a couple of channels, or as many channels as I like, and with a hotkey, which is Alt-Q, or this button, I can just temporarily just isolate these, right? And I can compare them. I can also hide specific channels if I'd like, just so that way, I can just kind of declutter my sequence if I want to just specifically focus on, specific tracks or channels and such. This is a super exciting workflow, and I'm really excited to get this out there because, as many of y'all know, with many dense sequences, it can be very hard to navigate. We've expanded our filters, so not only do we have our default filters, but we've expanded this to include a lot more things, including new features such as conditions and time warp. And we've added it kind of like buttons on the top of the sequencer tree. Or if you want to, you can have it vertical, similar to the content browser. We find that horizontal is a bit easier because people find the horizontal space very valuable. But all of these filters and the display actions actually work together. So you just have way more power to control the view of your sequence and how you want to work with that. You can also temporarily mute all of those as well, which is super powerful. Here I'm searching just all muted tracks, and also I can search all muted tracks that are track type of transform. So I can do all sorts of searches, like, hey, is this controlling a skeletal mesh? Is this controlling, a custom BP? Is this controlling, this? Do I want, can I get all locked tracks? Can I get all tracks, that are keyed at this time? So we have way more power within Sequencer, and just have custom filters that you all can now create and are able to use with also a full search history. And within our filters, you actually have an expression help, so you'll see all the keywords that you're able to use. Finally, I have shown the sidebar details before, but I really wanted to highlight how important this is. For folks that are aware about our keep state and restore state property, right? Having to constantly right-click and access those has been not fun. So now you're able to multi-select, use the details panel, and set that immediately, and set all the different properties that you have, and change color and such. So this is a super exciting one. I'm really happy to get that in. This isn't necessarily sequencer related, but one of our sequencer devs has been working on an experimental plugin for 5.5 called Gameplay Cameras. So this new tool and editor is used for creating cameras modularly and coordinate transitions of rigs and directors in a streamlined workflow. It has accessible debugging system, leveraging the rewind debugger, and there are nodes for camera offset sensors and procedural framing. We've been working together with the gameplay team and many internal teams within Epic, and we hope you try it because there's going to be a lot of exciting developments in this area. So I don't have a full demonstration of the workflow, but I would like to kind of show a video that the dev had put together. So these are all using the new systems, as well, a couple of assets, a couple of nodes, very easily being able to transition from the third person directly to this procedural side-scrolling mechanism. And then as we go back out, it just does a blend back, right? So very easy, a much easier system to author specifically camera behavior, right? So that's super exciting. And please give it a shot. So I've gone over all the stuff in 5.5. I provided all the context for Sequencer. Now let's get to the meat of this talk, right? Which is what's coming in the near future and what's coming beyond, right? So for Sequencer Core, we're going to be introducing relative time scaling. This has been a long-term ask as well from our gameplay customers, being able to relatively time scale based off of specific inputs. And this happens a lot with localized audio. As you can imagine, certain audio is longer or shorter depending on the language, so you want to be able to relatively scale your sequence based off of specific inputs. We've also known that there's been a lot of asks for root motion transition and to better seamless transition between gameplay and cinematics. So we're going to be focusing on that too, especially with the integration of Mover 2.0 and 5.5. One I'm very excited about is being able to handle animation mixing and masking. So most of you might be using either a cinematic animation blueprint, you duplicate the animation blueprint, right, and you have to use all the different logic in there. Well, we're trying to eliminate the need to use that and be able to bring that all within Sequencer. So one of the things is having a priority system for your animations and be able to bone mask or add masks within Sequencer sequencer to play your animations additively without having to go into animation blueprints or the animation assets and turn on and off certain properties just to access that. So you'll be able to do this all directly within sequencer. So you want to have your player to conditionally have an additive breathing animation only on the upper body. We'll be able to do that. As I talked about with gameplay cameras, we're going to integrate that as a track within sequencer and start our progress into procedural cameras and procedural framing. This will be super exciting, especially with characters of different proportions. You don't want to change stuff within that. You just want the sequence to be smart and have the cameras, just procedurally frame based off of certain rules. And parameterized keyframes, which is being able to change the value of a keyframe at runtime based off of certain logic that you want to write. For UX and quality of life, we're going to be introducing a navigation panel. We know that for heavy-ended cinematics, there can be a lot of subsequences and it's really hard to maintain. We feel the pains as well. So we're going to be introducing a panel where you have, it's kind of like an outliner-like thing where you see it in a hierarchical format. You'll be able to see properties such as H-bias, start frame offset, ins and outs, all sorts of different things that you can just really easily see at a glance without having to, again, click on something and look at the properties just to see what's happening, right? So you'll be able to see it all at a glance and be able to see all the things within your subsequences as well. Time bookmarks, being able to specify ranges in time and being able to either zoom into specifically that range in time or not and be able to just better organize your sequences. And different display modes. This is important because we have all sorts of customers who are coming from different backgrounds that are wanting different kind of timeline displays. So we want to be able to introduce something like that so that way our users are familiar with it. So that's all near future. So let's talk about what's the future. What is all this? So as I've stated before, Fortnite events has been a major driver for sequencer use. Every Fortnite live event and many of our demos have been powered by sequencer tool tech. And looking at all the work that our customers and you all and partners have made over the last 8 years, it has been apparent how much sequencer has played a critical part. However, we don't want to rest on our laurels, and we want to continue to empower and inspire creators to create even more immersive and interactive cinematic experiences. So we asked ourselves, where's this going? And what's the future of gameplay cinematics overall? There's so many people coming in, and there's from all walks of life and from different industries, and all using real-time 3D and cinematics and cinematic quality. Where do we want to go with this? So we started to look externally and kind of look at our trusted friends and partners and kind of see, where have they been going? What's stuff that's missing within the Unreal ecosystem that we can help provide? And over the past decade, there's been a lot of discussions from those studios sharing their workflows on gameplay cinematics, specifically around narrative cinematic branching dialogues. So for instance, our friends over at CD Projekt Red showcased their workflow on branching cinematic dialogues in their GDC 2016 talk for The Witcher 3. Ubisoft at GDC 2019 presented a similar talk around procedural camera framing of characters and procedural generation of cinematics from dialogue for their game Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Other customers such as Warner Brothers Avalanche and Big Bad Wolf Studios who have presented at previous Unreal Fests showed how they used the same or similar approaches but applied it in UE because they just didn't have the technology. So we feel like that from just looking around and seeing what our friends and partners and customers have been saying, we feel like that we found some key categories. And that I would like to highlight. Branching and flow of cinematics. Procedural generation of cinematics. And dynamic control of cinematics, whether that's playback or runtime values and such. And these three key areas, in our opinion, are crucial for narrative, cinematic-driven, interactive experiences. Whether you might not be in cinematic dialogues and such, there is something for you, and we feel like that this is something for all of the other industries that I've mentioned before. So we feel like that this is the future, and this is the way that we want to go and be able to provide solutions in these problem spaces for UE moving forward. And if you don't believe me, look at all the features that I've just mentioned, either in 5.5, which is highlighted in green, or all the features that we have coming up. They all don't necessarily fully encompass everything that we want to do within this, but they provide kind of an insight of the directions that we're going. These are all kind of building blocks to where we think we're going next. And we would love to hear what you all have to think about it, because obviously all of these things came from either direct customer feedback or interactions, but we feel like that this is the future that we really want to push. And not only do we feel like that this is essential for UE, but we feel like this is crucial for UEFN and the future of the metaverse. Having these advanced but yet accessible tools for UGC creators will help capture a new generation of game developers and to ensure that the future of gameplay cinematics is here to stay. And we want to empower as many creatives as possible to create all sorts of interactive experiences that they want directly within the Unreal ecosystem. So if you're interested in anything that I've discussed in this presentation, whether that is all the features in 5.5, all the stuff that we're talking about within the future, feel free to make it known to us. You can scan this QR code for our forward-facing roadmap underneath characters and animations, where you'll see cards of the features that I've mentioned today. If you want to talk more about either the 5.5 features or the move that we have for cinematic dialogues, I'll be at the Unreal kiosk at the Expo Hall from 2 to 3. And I also want to say I would not be here without the incredibly talented teams behind Sequencer, who not only worked tirelessly on the development of this tool, but also helped me put together this presentation. And with that, thank you.